Hey Bookaholics, and welcome back to another video. Today we are talking through our Fantasy Bingo 2025. For those of you who don't know, our Fantasy Bingo is Reddit Fantasy Bingo, which is something that happens every year from April 1st all the way through to March 31st. We're going to be going through the 2025 prompts. I'm going to talk through my TBR, which I generally ignore, but you never know. And we're also going to be talking through some recommendations that I have for each one. This year, I've decided to go completely different, and I am only recommending books written by women, also non-binary authors. So let's go through my TBR and recommendations for you. The first prompt is Knights and Paladins. One of the protagonists must be a paladin or a knight, and for hard mode, the character has an oath or a promise to keep. For me, I'm going to be reading The Fireborn Blade by Charlotte Bond. I don't know yet if this fulfills hard mode or if the sequel would, even if the first one doesn't. I don't know yet. I'm going to have to read and find out. But for recommendations for you, I have Lady Hotspur by Tessa Grattan. This one has several lady knights in it, and most of them have made some kind of oath to a parent or to a group of people who they have sworn to either protect, to defend, to conquer the realm for, etc. And then the other one is Sister Song by Lucy Holland, in which we have one of our three protagonists eventually becomes a knight and swears to protect their kingdom. For number 2, we have Hidden Gem, which is a book with under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. New releases and arcs from popular authors do not count. Follow the spirit of the square. And then for hard mode, it is published more than 5 years ago. So for me, I personally am going to be reading Fortune's Fall by Angela Board, which has currently, at time of filming this, 328 ratings, and it was first published in 2019, so it's 6 years old. For recommendations for you, I am going to go with Hummingbird's Tear by C.M. Curley, which has 318 ratings and was printed all the way back in 2015 for the first time. So this one is 10 years old and still only has 318 ratings. And the other one is Barn Red Skies by Kirsten Espinosa Rosero, which has 184 ratings and was printed in 2020. If you want to go by like exact dates instead of the year of printing, then you could always just read this at the beginning of 2026 because you've got 3 months to read it then. But in the spirit of it, it's been around for 5 years because of 2020. As you can tell, I'm not going through the synopses of these. There's 25 squares to get through, and I'm talking about 3 books at a time. These are fantastic books. Hummingbird's Tear is dark epic fantasy, and Barn Red Skies is dragon fantasy. Published in the 80s is the next square, and in it we are to read a book that was published anytime between 1980 and 1989, and the hard mode is that it's written by an author of colour. For me personally, I am going to be reading The Linden Hills by Gloria Naylor. I don't know a huge amount about this, but it was written in the 80s and it is by a woman of colour. And for recommendations for you, the typical ones, so I have Wild Seed by Octavia Butler, which was written in 1980 and is one of the books in the Pattern Master series by this author, which I absolutely love, but please check content warnings. Another one that you should probably check content warnings for is Beloved by Toni Morrison. Wild Seed is a sci fantasy and Beloved is magical realism. For high fashion, which is the next square, it says to read a book where clothing or fashion or fiber arts are important to the plot. This can be a crafty main character, such as in Torn by Rowena Miller, or a setting where fashion itself is explored, like in Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. And then hard mode, it says the main character makes clothes or fibers. So for this one, on my TBR, I have The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichek, as we do literally have one of them being a weaver. I feel like that would count. And then the recommendations that I have for you, the first one I have is Spellbound at Pemberley by Abigail Reynolds. Our protagonist uses a spinning wheel, which is not very common for upper class ladies, but it is because she wants to make the fabrics of her clothes herself from wool from her land so she can bond more with the land. It's important to the story and the magic system. It's one of the things that she does to help herself bond to the land. And the other one I have, which is quite a common recommendation I suspect, is 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. This one is a Regency romance, and our protagonist is a maid and she is stitching a quilt together, and it's like part of the magic and part of the story. It's intrinsic, that's why it's in the title. For the last square on the first row, which is Down with the System, read a book in which the main plot revolves around disrupting a system, and then hard mode is that it's not a governmental system. On my TBR, I have Some Desperate Glory, which is about taking down a machine, and I suspect that it is kind of going to be like a metaphor for a systemic structure as opposed to a governmental one. And then for recommendations I have for you, I have Terraformers by Annalie Newitz. This is my book club pick for June, so if you want to join. And this one is about taking down corporations. And then the other one I have is Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow, which is the witches meets the suffragettes movement, and it is taking down the patriarchy. For the second row, at number 6, we have Impossible Places. Read a book set in a location that would break a physicist. And then hard mode is that at least 50% of the book takes place in said impossible place. For me, on my TBR, I have Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Shimura. I believe this one takes place in a castle that is in a mirror world, and that everything's a bit funky when they're in the mirror world, and it's about these kids. I think it's a bit existential. I'm very excited to try it. And for recommendations, the obvious one being Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and the other one that I would recommend is The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, which is one of my favourite comedy horrors. For a book in parts, a book that is separated into large sections within the main text, this can include things like acts, parts, days, years, and so on, but it has to be more than just chapter breaks. For hard mode is that it has 4 or more parts. I personally am going to be choosing Ocean's Echo by Everine and Maxwell for this one, as I know that it's in parts because it is my book club pick for August, July, one of them, and I've already divvied up the parts for the vlog. I know that it has parts. Recommendations on my part, I would recommend Deathless by Catherine M. Valente, which is divided into 6 parts, and this is a Slavic folklore / World War II story. And we have Babel by R.F. Kuang, which is split into 5 parts, and this is a fantasy version of anti-colonial Victorian era. The next tile is Gods and Pantheons. Read a book featuring divine beings, and the hard mode is that there are multiple pantheons involved. I personally have I've already read mine, which is Redemption in Indigo by Karen Lord. They're not quite pantheons, but they are different collectives or groupings of these otherworldly spiritual beings, which I think would still count. And then for recommendations for you, I have Godblind, which is by Anna Stevens, and it is literally a divine war. We have 2 sets of gods. One who is the kind of more villainous one, which is the dark magic and sacrifices kind of gods, which are known as the warrior and the dark lady. And then we also have the more nature-based gods, which are the dancer, who is like Mother Nature, and the fox god, who is the trickster god. And then the other one that I would recommend is The Sons of Mil by L.M. Rouvier, and this one has 3-ish kind of pantheons. I asked the author to summarize it because I didn't want to mislead you. And we have Reason and True South are the philosophies of Bethany, and it is patriarchal and wants men over all else. And then in a different part of the world, we have the Sorial, or the cult of Siora, the ancestor, who was a former prostitute who saved thousands of lives during the transition and was reputedly reborn as a dragon. And then you finally have the faith in a different culture, which is representative of the Celtic pantheon. So we've got 3 different pantheons going on in there. Last in the series is the next square, which is to read the final entry into a series, and then hard mode is that the series is 4 or more books long. My pick is going to be The Other Wind by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is the 6th book in the Earthsea series, because I am hoping to buddy read that with my husband this year. For you, obviously, we should read the last book in a series that you've got ongoing. If, however, you do not have any ongoing series, I'm going to give you some that I think will be really quick to get through for obvious reasons. The first one being Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. This is a 4-book cozy sci-fi series, and I would just recommend that you check them out because they are really quick to get to. They're lots of fun, but they've also got quite interesting themes, and they're quite discussion heavy, but in like a cozy way. So I would recommend checking those out. And yeah, like if you want like a 4-book series, it would be an easy one to get through. And then I've also got a series of novellas, which is the Tenserit series by Neon Yang, which happens to have 4 novellas in it. Prompt number 10 is one that I very rarely participate in. This is the book club or read along book, which is to pick one of the official group reads that our fantasy has ever done. And then the hard mode is that you actually have to participate in book club. I don't do this, so I will just allocate one later on. I'll just, near the end of the year, I'll be like, have I read any of these? And then just go, okay, I'll take that one. But ones that they have done in the podcast in case you want some recommendations. They've done The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon or The Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst, both of which I would highly recommend. For third row, we have a parent protagonist. Read a book where the main character has a child to care for. The child does not have to be biologically related to the character. And then hard mode is the child is also a major character in the story. I personally am going to be using The Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel because I am fairly certain that her son is quite prevalent in the story. And then for recommendations for you, I have The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. A lot hinges on her kids in the second half of the book. And then we have A Woman of the Sword by Anna Smith Spark, who one of her sons eventually gets a POV. Then we have Epistolary, where a book must prominently feature the following: a diary or journal entries, letters, messages, newspaper clippings, transcripts, etc. And then for hard mode is that the book is told entirely in epistolary format. So I am going to be trying Nothing But Rain by Naomi Salmon. This is a novella, and I believe that this one is told in diary entries. The recommendations I have for you is the obvious This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is a sci-fi romance that is told through letters across time. And then the other one is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers, which basically the whole thing is like a detailed report on this space journey that has been undertaken, and like it kind of ends as like an email kind of thing, or I hope that this finds you well kind of thing. So I think that this would count as well. Then we have published in 2025 as the next square, and that is a book that was published for the first time in 2025, i.e. no reprints or special editions or like new editions. And for hard mode, it is also a debut novel, so the author's first published novel. I personally am considering doing The Morrigan by Kim Curran, which was released on the 6th of February this year. The paperback comes out at the end of the year, so I'll probably pick that up then because I love The Morrigan. And I love mythology retellings, and I love the ones that are from the perspectives of women. For you guys, I have two. One meets hard mode and one doesn't, because I haven't read that many yet that have been out this year, and it's only April, so there's still plenty of time. So I have Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill, which came out on the 25th of February. But I also have Mists of Memory by NC Scrimshaw. This is not the author's debut though. Green Teeth is an author debut. Mists of Memory isn't. I only have one for hard mode on that one, but if you want to check out a sequel, or you want to check out a self-pub author, Mists of Memory would work. For author of colour, which is tile number 14, it is to read a book by a person of colour, and for hard mode, read a horror novel. I personally am going to be trying out The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. It's like a haunted house vibe, but obviously it's actually a reformatory, and I believe that it's going to have a lot of commentary, which I'm very excited for. For you guys, I would recommend Leech by Huron Edders, which is a gothic horror, and then we have Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon, which is a folk horror. For 15, it is press or small press or self-published. So read a book that is published by a self-press, so not one of the big 5 publishing houses or Bloomsbury, or self-published. If a formerly self-published book has been picked up by a publisher, it only counts if you read it before it was picked up. And then for hard mode, it is the book has under 100 ratings on Goodreads or is written by a marginalized author. I have all of the above. So I personally am going to be reading Petition by Delilah Wan, which currently has 70 ratings on Goodreads. And then my recommendations to you are Blood Indigo by Tallulah J. Sullivan. This one is a Native American inspired epic fantasy with sci-fi elements, and the author is Native American, so again fits all of the criteria. And then we have Outlaw Mage by K.S. Veloso, which is also self-published and is also written by a woman who is Asian. This one has 88 ratings, so you haven't got very long before that will reach its 100, so you might want to read it soon. For the fourth row, the first thing we have is Biopunk, so read a book that focuses on biotechnology and or its consequences. And hard mode is that there are no electricity-based technologies. My pick is going to be Dawn by Octavia Butler. I did not know this was Biopunk, but I have seen it on several lists, so I'm going to just trust that blindly. And for you guys, I would recommend Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin. This one has an interesting take on biopunk, and a similar take is also Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. I can't actually talk to you about the element of biopunk because it would be a spoiler, but just trust me on it. For Elves or Dwarves, which is the next prompt, is to read a book that features the classical fantasy archetypes of elves and or dwarves. They do not have to fit the classic tropes, but they must be either named elves or dwarves, or they need to be identifiable as elves or dwarves. And for hard mode is that the main character is either an elf or a dwarf. I personally am hoping to pick up The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. It's about time I read this book. That's a epic fantasy standalone, but then it's got like a companion series, I believe. And then for recommendations for you, I have A Chorus of Dragons by Jen Lyons. There are these people who are very elf-like in nature. And the other one I have is Winnowing Flame, because one of the main characters is from this race. It's called the Eborans, that are basically like, they used to be elves and have been corrupted into becoming vampires, and they're kind of like a cross between the two. And I would highly recommend checking out that series anyway. For LGBTQIA plus protagonist, it's to read a book where the main character is under the LGBTQIA umbrella, and hard mode is that the character is marginalized on at least one other axis, so it's a bit more intersectional. So a person of color, a disabled person, a member of a different ethnicity, religious or cultural minority within the story. I personally am going to be reading Wrath's Daughter for this prompt, which is by A.E. Cosby, and it's the second book in the Chaos series by this author, which is a fantasy sci-fi romance. Recommendations I have for you, I have The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, which has one of the main protagonists is queer and is a character of colour. And we also have Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant, where one of the main characters is queer and is also autistic. For square number 19, we have 5 SFF short stories, so read any SFF short story as long as there are 5 of them. And for hard mode, it is to read an entire SFF anthology or collection. I personally, the only one that I have on here, this one I haven't done where it's all female, because I don't think I have any where it's all female, but I am going to be reading Out There Screaming by Jordan Peele, which does also feature female authors, and this is black horror. And then we also have, for my recommendations, I have The Advent of Winter, which is some kind of cold, wintry vibed epic fantasy, and The Anatomy of Fear, which is dark epic fantasy. Please do not look at that cover and assume that it's horror. It's not. It's dark epic fantasy. It's not even necessarily atmospheric epic fantasy, it's just dark. Do go in with the right expectations, but they are both great. For the next one we have Stranger in a Strange Land, which is to read a book that deals with a foreigner in a new culture. The character or characters, if there is a group, must be visiting or moving to the country as a minority. And then hard mode is that the main character is an immigrant or a refugee. The one I'm going to be reading is Blood Mage by Chaos Veloso, which is the second book in the DJ and Puppet Master series. The protagonist is an immigrant in this culture and is treated as such. The recommendations I have for you is I have A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martin. The protagonist is an ambassador, but it is a minority culture, so while I don't think they would be treated quite like an immigrant would, because they have political status, they are still treated lesser than some of the more prevalent and more important communities and societies within this world, so I still think that's relevant and important. And then the other one that I have is A Secret History of Witches by Louise Morgan. The protagonists are Roma and are initially in France, which I think is where they're from, so they're not immigrants there. Across the generations, they end up needing to flee to England, and then they are obviously treated as such as immigrants in England. So I still feel like this would count. 5th row across, final row that we have, the first square on this row is recycle a bingo square. So from any of the previous years, from 2015 to 2024, as long as it doesn't repeat on the current card. And then for hard mode, it's just to use the hard mode of that square. So I've gone with historical fantasy. The read that I have chosen is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It is a historical fiction in setting, but it also has a magical realism element to it. And then for the recommendations I have for you, I have The Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. This one is Inuit and Norse inspired historical fantasy. And then we have Conjure Women by Afia Atakora, which is antebellum South. Cozy SFF is the next square, and for cozy, it's up to your preference what you find comforting, but the genre typically features relatable characters, low stakes, minimal conflict, and a happy ending. For hard mode, it is that the author is new to you. I personally am going to be reading The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. This is, I believe, a cozy romance fantasy. And for recommendations for you, I have Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quenby Olson. I have a review for this series. I love this series. It's Regency romance, well, very light on the romance to begin with. It's a Regency setting but with dragons in it, and it's an older main character. And then we have The Hex Appeal by Kate Johnson, which is just like a witchy romance. Then for generic title, we need to read a book that has one or more of the following words in the title, and the words are blood, Bone, Broken, Court, Dark, Shadow, Song, Sword, or Throne. Plurals are allowed. And hard mode, the title contains more than one of the listed words or contains at least one word and a colour, number, or animal, real or mythical. I have A Woman of Blood and Bone by Annie Anderson on my TBR, and recommendations that I have for you would be A Court of Broken Knives by Anna Smith Spark, and one that I'm just going to shout out because it's coming out this year and I want more people talking about it, is The Broken Court by L.L. McGray, which is the last book in the Dragon Spirit series. For 24, we have not a book, so do something besides reading. Watch a TV show, play a game, learn how to summon a demon. Okay, maybe not the last one. Spend time with fantasy, science fiction, or horror in another format. I personally am going to try watching Sweet Tooth, which is on Netflix. I've never watched it, which I know is odd as a fantasy fan, so I'm going to give that a go. Recommendations for you. I have Tiny Tina's Wonderland as a video game. It's just one of my favorite video games. I have the 2020 Dracula retelling that I think is on Netflix. I'm not sure. As a movie, I don't really watch many movies, but like, if you've not watched it, watch Princess Bride. What's wrong with you? And then for board games, like the only ones that I really play, the only fancy one that I really play is Catan. So Catan. I play adventure books. Any of the adventure books would be fun. But I don't really have much in the way of recommendations for that. And then for pirates, we have read a book where characters engage in piracy. And the hard mode is that it's not a seafaring pirate. I personally am going to be trying Ocean's Goodori by Elaine Yu Cho. I don't know much about this, but I saw it on a recommendations list and it's one that I want to read, so it's going on there. For recommendations are Moroder by L.L. McRae. I know she's come up a lot on this list. It's one of those things. But there are Sky Pirates in here. And then we have Red Scholar's Wake by Aliette de Bodad, which has space pirates. And that's your lot. Those are all the books that I'm reading. Those are all the books that I would recommend that you read. Let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them. Please, please, please give me recommendations for all of the prompts. Literally any of the prompts that you can think of a good recommendation by a woman or a non-binary author, please do list them down below. Please, I need them. But that's it. That's all from me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye.